This is great stuff.
I watched this after.
Yeah, everybody.
Decided by the city attorney. I was like, it's not that I don't like it. I just used to sitting by Steve, so I keep going there. Can you find it down there?
Are you finding the dispenser? Are you finding it?
Even in the city that wasn't say it working, I'm just pointing on.
Is teaching
But I still do it.
and it's the running joke. Mine now I have to do this.
Yeah, now you have to do one.
When it's down the street.
It's been a couple years. I think it just
And now the neighbors are afraid.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, now you walk down the street like
he's here. He's here all he's not here Friday, but he's here. Like, he's in a Tyler thing, but he's
Yeah, take a little look.
maybe in around.
Yep.
He's off Friday.
Well, welcome everybody. It is 7 o'clock and time to begin our city council meeting. We appreciate everyone being here this evening, and thanks for taking the time to join us. We are going to start off tonight, turn the time over to Councilmember Peterson for our opening ceremony.
Thank you. Will you please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our Father in heaven, we come before Thee as a community this evening as we begin deliberations on behalf of the residents of Clearfield. We are grateful for the opportunity and freedoms that allow us the opportunity to peaceably assemble and to do the business of this community here and in the open. We are grateful for those who hail from this community, who serve and protect us in our police, our fire, and those in our armed forces. We pray for them and for their safety and safe return, and also for those family members who support their mission and their daily activities. We also pray for the employees who serve our residents and for the tasks that they are called upon to perform on behalf of them. We also pray for wisdom as we deliberate about the future of our community and those things that will help Clearfield rise and to move forward as we address the growth, the opportunities that come to this valley. Will you do this in the name of Thy Son, Jesus Christ? Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Nika. We have minutes to approve, council, from the April 3rd work session, April 10th work session, and the May 8th policy session. Has council had a chance to review the minutes? Are there any changes or additions? If not, I'd entertain a motion on the minutes.
Your Honor, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of April 3rd work session, April 10th work session, May 8th policy session as written.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on the minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the minutes stand as submitted. Well, the first item on our agenda tonight is a public hearing to receive public comment on a zoning text amendment to City Code Title 11, land use for the adoption of form-based code. And I'm going to go ahead and turn the time over to Spencer Brimley for some background on that.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. There, that works.
Now we're on.
My apologies. I was correcting something on my computer real quick, and so we can get that projected to the screen. But while I'm doing that, so the zoning text amendment this evening is for the council to consider the adoption of what's called form-based code. And form-based code is a zoning designation different from what's been known as traditional zoning or zoning based on use. And it looks at the form and the function of how a community is built, creating places and spaces where people want to live, work, and play. And the city started on this process as a recommendation from the small area plan that was adopted last spring by the city council relative to the small area plan process that was started in April of 2015 and completed again in the spring of 17. And so from that, recommendations came that one of the things that needed to be done is for the adoption of a form-based code in the downtown area of Clearfield City, which has really been identified as 300 north down to 1,000 south. And so this document has been through several iterations and discussions. There's been a steering committee that was in place that consisted of members of the council, planning commission, private business owners, and the public, who discussed this at length and also gave input and feedback relative to the formulation of this document. This document is the product of a template that was created by Wasatch Front Regional Council and Visit Utah in order to kind of create a context that could be implemented across the Wasatch Front. And I'm spoiling the surprise there, I apologize. And so this evening we've invited our consultants with Civil Solutions Group, John Jansen and Jake Young, who are going to give us a presentation relative to the final product, what's in it, and what we can expect out of it, and then hopefully be able to answer questions relative to that. So,
Okay. Gentlemen.
Good evening. Thanks for having us here. So, yes, this is the culmination of, I was trying to decide, 8 or 9 months worth of work that we've been doing with your city to try and implement the general plan amendment that you did for the downtown. And just kind of want to go over a few things with you all. We've had some input from the council, from council members, and try to work on some of that in the last week or so. We will be trying to wrap this up as much as we can tonight, and I think it's pretty close to ready. So just back to some of the basics here. First off, placemaking, which is a kind of a catchy word out there in the planning world, talking really about places as opposed to individual properties, okay? Traditional zoning really looks at just individual properties. Here we're trying to implement a code that helps create a place in your community. It is based on the form, as Spencer said, not as much on the land uses, but land uses are in there. It is more proactive in that it's attempting to say to the developer, here's what we expect of you, as opposed to let's just react to your proposal. It is prescriptive, meaning it does have an awful lot of requirements and regulations, but within those regulations, there is quite a bit of flexibility for the developer. And again, it is trying to implement the plan that you all adopted. So going over that, I think Spencer actually covered most of this. We did have an open house, seemed to get some very positive input about doing something about the downtown. We've had a hearing with the Planning Commission. They did recommend it to you. We did do some edits after the Planning Commission meeting that resulted in the ordinance you have before you. In terms of the layout of the overall ordinance, there is an introduction. We get into the places and districts which actually reflect what you have in your plan. There's a chapter on uses, which we'll talk about a little bit more as we go on. Street types, suggesting how the streets ought to look. Building types, suggesting the types of buildings that ought to show up in each of the districts. And that really is one of the foundations of form-based codes, is that you're looking at what kind of buildings you hope to see in a particular place. Open space types, we have right there. Landscaping, we've included something that provides a street tree plan for Main Street and along 700 South. Parking, good chapter on that. The signs that would be allowed in that district and the overall district, and then administration. And that's how it's laid out.
So big picture, there's 3 places. Think of a place as a center or a node. On the north is the Civic Center. That's where we are here in this area. So in the north is the Civic Center. That's where we are in this building. And then in the middle is Maybe Place. Maybe Place is intended to be the most intense highest density, the highest building heights. That'll become the heart of the city, and your relatives come to visit. That's where you take them to go see something cool and eat. And then on the south, we have Access Point, which is coming into the city. Oh, that's also maybe placed there, another drawing. But then on the south, we have Access Point. And that's relatively similar to what you have now with increased commercial buildings, increased residential dwellings. So that's the big picture on the three centers or nodes. Tattoos?
Not tonight, thanks. And since they're prohibited anyway. I think it's important to realize the way this is set up is that we have these broad categories of use. They are, very general, so that's fairly simplified within the ordinance. When you use broad categories like that, it sort of forces you to say, what don't we want to see in these districts? I've included a little phrase here about typical uses, because there is a page that talks about the broad categories and what are typical uses within those categories. But probably the biggest issue here is mostly the prohibitions. You've got a list there, but that list goes on a full page worth, actually, of prohibitions, okay? So broad categories basically says what's generally allowed and then prohibited uses within those categories, okay?
Streets are very important to the form-based code. Streets are the lifeblood of the city. It's how we get around. You go to a great place like downtown, Main Street in Salt Lake City. Main Street is...
I don't know what your mic's doing, but it's the Kermit the Frog mic. I don't know. Yes.
Okay. Is that better?
We'll go with that one.
Okay. Streets are part of the form-based code. Streets are very important to having a nice center, quality places. So I want to run through a couple of the street types. This is the Maybe Place Street, extremely wide sidewalks, on-street parking, 2 lanes of travel, and then share bike lanes. Generic commercial street, this could be used in other commercial parts of the code area. 2 travel lanes, and then also on-street parking, which in the code it allows for either parallel as shown or also 45 degree. And wide sidewalks, not as wide as Maybe Place, but also wide, which is very important for commercial activity and street life. Buildings.
Okay. Again, these are the types of buildings that would be allowed in each of the districts, and those are set up through a table that we have. They address heights, frontages, setbacks, which are pretty much typical zoning provisions. But then we talk about where should parking be allowed, and that is in there also. There's some issues about where we might have more than one building on a parcel, so a principal building versus an accessory building or a second principal building in the back. We have concerns that were raised in our process about transitions to some of the existing neighborhoods that are adjacent to the downtown, and those are addressed. Trying to make the buildings interesting. Again, this is a basic foundation of form-based codes that you want to make sure that you're going to get good-looking buildings, and so there are provisions for that. And for our mixed-use buildings, commercial buildings, there's a lot of discussion about how much glass we get on the first floor. These are the districts that we have and the types of buildings that are allowed in each one. You'll see the office is allowed in all of them, civic buildings are allowed in all of them, but then we're more particular with the mixed-use, multifamily, only in 3 of those districts. Then again, that would be a straight multifamily building as opposed to mixed, where you might have a commercial first floor, an office first floor, and multifamily up above. Commercial buildings, adaptive reuse is a term that at least for me, doesn't quite gel when I say it. So just to explain that, it'd be taking an existing building and reusing it, okay? So there's standards for how that could be accomplished.
Like a remodel.
Yeah, yeah. Townhouses, some particular standards for them. Mansion homes, which are larger looking single-family homes that are broken up into several units, okay? So we have standards for each of those. Just maybe focus on the typical photo examples there. Again, you'd have a chart for each one, starting with this, what's up there at the top. Okay, multifamily, different examples of those. Office buildings, hopefully get some of those. Commercial buildings, so that the standard commercial building that you've been getting, this would improve upon that quite a bit, okay, in terms of the siting of that building and what that building is going to look like, encouraging the corner towers on the one picture. Townhouses, the attempt here is to push the entrance, the garages, to the back, okay, so that this is not just a garage-oriented building that you see. So.
Okay. Open space is essential to high quality of life, and built into the code is a requirement for open space, and that comes in the form of parks, plazas, squares. The basic requirement is each project will have 10% open space, and open space is defined that has to be usable in terms of, like I said, a park, a plaza, not just generic landscaping, but a usable open space. And then 50% of it must be public. So those are kind of the two big issues there. Landscaping, also 10%. There are requirements for street trees, shrubs, trees, all of that. It's kind of a performance-based landscape. I've seen this in a lot of cities. It works really well. You end up with nice quality landscapes, and there's a relationship to the size of the project in terms of the acres and the number of plants that are required. Parking is based off of the building type and the size of the building, and then also there are options for shared parking. For example, if you have an office building next to a restaurant, the restaurant's busy in the evening, the office is busy during the day, then they can share parking. There are also built-in requirements for bike parking, and the idea is to get the right size of parking, but not too much, because wasted parking is wasted land.
Maybe just mention some of the new concepts here.
Okay, a couple of things that are in here. Compact spaces, an option for that. That's a smaller space, great for the Civics and smaller cars like that. Low impact development, LID, that's so that stormwater goes into bioswales or into the landscape in the parking lot. On-street parking credits. So if a developer is building the street with the project, then the on-street parking can count for visitor parking. If it's for multifamily or apartments, they get visitor credit. And if it's a commercial use, then that on-street parking counts towards parking credits because it is part of the project and will be used. And then also the idea of park once, meaning you park in a development and there are sidewalks and it's connected, and so you choose to walk because it's easier or more convenient than to drive from one store to another. Oh, and then also the option of head-out parking, which is where you back in and pull out. It's safe. It is being used in a few Utah cities, and that's an option.
And for signs, again, part of the appearance of that area that we're trying to improve, we have specific sign regulations by district here. So wall signs, awning signs, marquees. You got signs in windows, projecting signs. We're seeing more and more of the projecting signs being used in communities. Helps identify the business that's there. There are some that actually recommend skipping your name of your business and actually saying what your business does or has for sale. Seems to be really helpful getting folks in there. Monument signs and center identification signs. The last chapter is administration. How do we process developments within this form-based code? It would be done as a site plan process, which you already have in your ordinances, with approval by the Planning Commission. However, there may be development agreements involved. That is one way to create some more flexibility with the concepts in the ordinance. And development agreements obviously come back to you all for an approval. There's a section on nonconformities, which is the new state law term for nonconforming uses. They've expanded that quite a bit in the last few years to fences, signs, and parking lots, all kinds of things. So it's now nonconformities. That's covered in there. And we do have definitions at the end. I'll mention that from Councilman Phipps, we got quite a few good comments from you and appreciated those. We've gone through and touched up some of the definitions and edited a few spots based on the comments we got from him. And just before the meeting, Councilman Bush had a comment about the hotels, and we actually don't have any Ds in any of our charts, so we'll just delete that part.
Relating to the hotel.
Yeah, to the hotel. So there's a couple little editing things that I think we might be still needing to take care of. So, okay?
Okay.
All right. Any questions for us?
We may bring you back up. We'll see. Yeah. Thanks, gentlemen. We will go ahead and declare the public hearing open. Do we have anybody that is here to speak in regards to our form-based code proposal tonight? I don't have any sheets from anyone.
Your Honor, seeing no public comment, I move to close the public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that closes our public hearing. Brings us to item number 2, which is our second public hearing to receive public comment on an amendment to the final subdivision plat for West Square subdivision located at approximately 875 South and Depot Street. And Spencer, it's a Spencer Brimley kind of evening, so
Tends to
we'll turn
be.
the time back over to you.
It tends to be, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor, members of the council and the public. So the request this evening is for an amendment to the existing subdivision plat for the West Square Apartments. This project was approved previously by the Planning Commission and the council, and had a development agreement attached to it that was executed back in 2016. Relative to the development of that site, the developer has seen fit to come in and make them go from apartments, or desires to go from apartments to condos. Just to give a little bit of context to the public, kind of where we're talking about here. So this is 875 South Depot Street. So if you're traveling down 700 South, headed east, you turn right before you get to the light and head down that road that looks like it ends. And back there is where they're developing the site. It's surrounded by multifamily. You've also got the rail to the west there. What they're proposing to do is take the first building that's actually going up right now, is under construction, and condominiumize that and make each unit for sale, potentially owner occupied. The first building would have 53 units. There are 3 buildings total, and they would potentially condo each building as well. This would require some changes to the development agreement, which is also on your agenda this evening, but you'll see the breakdown there too. 4 one-bedrooms, 29 two-bedrooms, and 23 bedroom units. And then just to give you an idea of, again, a little bit more context here, the property is zoned R3, which is consistent for multifamily, whether it's apartments or condos or townhomes, whatever the case may be. In this particular instance, they will be developing, building the structures, and then they will be condos there. This, again, to give you a layout, here's the building, this first building right here, and we'll zoom in a little bit as well to give you a little bit better context. And then this is just a breakdown of the units there. So here's just some visuals for everyone relative to the construction that's going on. They will have some tuck under parking as well as surface parking relative to the development of the site, which is required in the R3 to have at least 1 covered stall. And so Looks to be a great project from that regard. This item was heard by the Planning Commission in order to amend the subdivision plat to condominiumize, and they recommended approval to the council on this based on the following conditions listed here in the presentation and in the staff report. So,
Okay, thank you, Spencer. We'll go ahead and open the public hearing. We have anybody here to speak in regards to our to West Square? You'd come forward and, I don't have a form from you, but if you come forward, state your name and.
Mayor, this is the developer on the property.
This is the developer?
Yeah.
I thought that's what you were asking.
Oh, no.
I'm happy to answer questions for the council of the academy. Otherwise, I'm good.
Very good. Anyone else from the public that want? Okay, then I'd entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Your Honor, I move to close public comment.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. And that brings us to our third public hearing. This is the public hearing to receive public comment on an amendment to the final subdivision plat for the property located at approximately 572 West and 300 North. Council, we've been discussing this with the developer. There's some what's the word I'm looking for? Outstanding issues. Thank you. We'll go with Stuart's. We have some outstanding issues that we need to resolve on this, and I think in lieu of taking public comment tonight and starting there, we need to table the public hearing so that we can get some of the issues resolved there before we bring it out for approval and a public hearing. Nancy, is there a date that we wanted to extend this public hearing to?
Spencer, are you good with June 12th? We talked about June 12th earlier today.
So do we continue it or until then, or do we re-notice it?
We went, excuse me, went renotice it. If you did a motion to table the public hearing until June 12th at 7 p.m., we wouldn't need to renotice it.
So that would be my recommendation to you, council, is that we do table this until that point.
So move.
Okay, we have a motion to table this until our June 12th meeting.
Second.
And we have a second from Councilmember Thompson. Any further discussion on that? And all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we'll stand that, leave that table. That brings us to our public comment period, our open comment period. We want to make sure that the public has an opportunity to address the council and any concerns that you have. I don't have any forms from anyone to speak tonight, but we don't want to deny that opportunity. Is there anyone here that is here to address the council? Sure, if you would come on up and just state your name and address, so we can record that for the record.
I'm not a resident, I'm an investor in the area. Actually on 250 North is why I'm coming up with you guys. I've only owned for about 3 years, and my issues that I keep running into are, what are we doing about code enforcement? I feel like I'm the only one that maintains the property. Today I took pictures. I apologize, I'm poorly prepared. I didn't realize there was a meeting today. You guys are welcome to look at these here today. This is just standard. I've got weeds. My neighbors are, they're this high. I've looked for my broken window. It was missing today, but I noticed the first 6 slides of your training program talks about broken windows. It's just constant going on over there. I'm sure you guys know the street. I have 12 units there. Mine's easy to spot. I don't have weeds. So
I know which one's yours then.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out what we're doing about that, because my quick numbers on that, I've spent approximately $95,000 in the past three years maintaining my property. I think I can make some cuts there.
We've actually just shifted, and we're in the process.
That's what I found out today, because I complained again today, and I know that's a process going on, but again, I'm coming up on my 4th year on this, and I'm getting frustrated as an owner.
Oh, absolutely, and a lot of that is shifted simply because the way we were set up before, we really didn't have a whole lot of teeth.
Right.
To really take it and make it happen.
I understand it's a difficult job.
So with this change and shifting this over to our community services department, will totally change what we're able to
Okay,
to
yeah.
do it in regards to code enforcement. So we're hoping to see some, we just met our new,
Set up a meeting.
yeah, we should
Yeah.
probably set up a meeting with,
So yeah, what I like, we need to get his name for the record, and then I'll know what to call him. But I'd like to set up a meeting with you to sit down for the community development office and talk to our code compliance division, and then see what we can do to assist you relative to some of these concerns.
I would just like to see some teeth.
Sure.
It's really what I'm looking for.
This evening, you'll see there's an ordinance on the docket for hopefully giving us some more of that teeth and the way that we go about doing code enforcement and code compliance in the city. So
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, when I took over the property, I had 3 tenants that I recognized that I pushed out of Weber County, because Weber County's pushing everyone out, and they're coming here. And I know that's not what you guys are looking for, but what do? I mean, I'm spending huge amounts of money in the area, and I'm trying to figure out why. So yeah, I'd appreciate you guys to look at that. Hopefully the sooner the better, because I like what you guys are looking to do. I have a lot of confidence in the future, but I'm just trying to figure
You
out
bet.
when it's actually going to happen and we're going to do something. So,
okay. Can we get your name for the record
Absolutely.
and address, I guess?
yeah, I'm still Nesbitt. Want to write that down for you? Got it. And then my address is 4948 Kiwana Drive, South Ogden.
Okay.
And that's 03.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else that wanted to speak this evening? We're going to start with your name and address instead of ending with it, just so we're, yeah.
My name is Michelle Atwood, 1850 South, 200 East, Apartment C2, Clearfield. Okay, my first comment is with the construction. If you ever lived in a townhome like I do, you will know the biggest complaint is not having a place for your kids to play. So while it looks pretty having all the garages in the back, all you're doing is pushing the kids in the back to the front to play where the street is. And that's not really safe for kids, as you know, it's on a busy street. Anyone that has kids would realize that. So at number 2 is I live in the Heather States apartment in the townhomes, and I am tired of all the drugs and the crime that's going on there. I know the police officers are tired of coming out with all the drugs and crime on there. I have called multiple times about my neighbors smoking marijuana. I have multiple police reports saying that police can smell marijuana coming out of their apartment. But no one's being arrested, no one's being kicked out. And I know there is doing drugs next door because I have recorded people coming and going all night long. I have recorded taking pictures of cars and license plates, and no one is taking us seriously as concerned residents that want to kick out the crime and live in a good place. We realize it's the low-income housing, but there's a lot of good families there who are trying to keep it clean. So we want to put pressure on you guys, put pressure on the police department, and also the managers of Heather's Estates to take some action. And maybe you can put one of those police trucks you guys get stationed, you put it at the park lot, you know, the park behind right next across from Antelope Elementary School, because there's a lot of crime there from everybody that comes over from that schooling over there with all those crime people. But if you can put that in the apartment, preferably for my neighbors see one, then they would see what I could see, maybe action would be getting taken sooner.
Very good. Well, I appreciate you bringing that up, and it's certainly on our radar.
I realize, I know they come all the time, and we love our police officers, but we want it figured out and stopped.
Well, and Chief might be able to give you a little bit of input as to where they are and methods
So
are
I'm
taken.
not always the one calling and.
If you want to grab him. And,
yes,
yeah.
it's Michelle Ian. Okay, thank you.
Very good, thank you. Is there anyone else? Okay, well then we will move, if I can turn my page over. Move over to item number 5, which is to consider action on an amendment to the final subdivision plat for the property located at 572 West 300 North. This is the one that we just tabled the public hearing on. So really, do we need to?
No, we'll make a note in the minutes. We'll make a note in the minutes that it was.
Okay, very good. Then we'll go to item 6, which is to consider approval of ordinance 2018-6, enacting Title 11, Chapter 19 to the Clearfield City Code, adopting a form-based code to regulate the development of the downtown corridor. This is the presentation we just had. So, Council, do you have any further questions for Jake and John, or for Spencer?
I don't have any questions per se, Your Honor, but I guess I would just like to express my feelings about this. That this has been something that's been on my mind a lot. I literally have lost a lot of sleep over this and grappled with it. And I don't want to debate it or belabor it. There's been a lot of people that have been patient with me as I've worked through this. But I still feel that, you know, and people have called me narrow-minded or old-fashioned, but I feel that the municipal government does have an invested need to look at usage. And I think we recognize that in this and even the names of the zone, where we're still talking residential, commercial. And so this is a version of where, so I realize it's not pure form-based because there is a blend of usage in it, which I'm grateful for. That when this originally came up, I was concerned that it would be the purest version of form-based. But what that does for me now is it concerns me especially the removal of the elected officials from the decision process. Two concerns of that, that there is not an involvement in the elected officials in the ultimate usage of those zones, as well as there's not any kind of constraint on that. I appreciate the great work that's been done, and I appreciate the design constraints and all of that. That is, I think, a wonderful thing. It reaches the goals of standardization. It reaches the goals of commonality and retaining a level of quality. But without constraints upon density, without the constraints of categories of use, without the recognition and the approval of elected officials, I struggle with that. I've said from the beginning, I'm concerned that we end up at the mercy of developers who, you know, and I appreciate the integrity of the developers that sit in front of us today. I appreciate their concern for the city and their desire to provide a good, usable thing that fits within the bounds of the city and what we would want to do. But not everyone is going to be like that. And I'm concerned that once we open this up, we will have developers, and there's nothing wrong with making money. That's why we all do what we do, whatever business we're in. But when their sole purpose will be to say, I got a great opportunity now to come to Clearfield, maximize my investment, and walk away and leave the city with something that they will need to deal with for decades. That's a concern I can't get over. So on the macro perspective, those are my concerns that I've expressed from the beginning, and so nobody should be surprised at that. But on the micro perspective, I am concerned, and I appreciate that the response from the comments that I provided. I do feel like some of the comments that were not addressed are still valid, and so in the document itself, because I look at this as something that is going to be rigorously reviewed by people who have expensive attorneys and things like that, and they're going to look for ways to exploit it. So when I see something that is not tightly written, and it's not deliberate, I don't express that. I think it's well intended, but I see some opportunities there for some gaps in the wording, in the approach, and those kinds of things that could open us up to things that we didn't envision. And I don't want to belabor that, but I would like to refer those, and I know the council and the mayor and city staff has copies of that, and I would like to include those in the discussion today. So if nothing else, you know, I don't know how to, 10 years from now I can say, well, I tried to tell you, you know, that was poorly written. So, you know, a couple of things concerns I have is, and this goes back to the vision of Clearfield. One of the visions of Clearfield I have is in many ways the support of Hill Air Force Base. And ironically, just last week, somebody that I know very well, but works at Hill Air Force Base as a manager, stopped me and he said, so would Clearfield be interested in having some contractor offices? And I said, well, sure. I said, well, there's a company I work with that has an office on the East Coast and on the West Coast, and they thought that they have a substantial presence at Hill Air Force Base. They thought maybe it's time to open up an office in Utah. And when they approached Hill Air Force Base, they said, yeah, Layton has some great places for you for your office. And I think, and many of you that have been around me for a while have heard me say over and over again that as a contractor at Hill Air Force Base, I'd leave the West Gate, drive through Clearfield, go to my office in Layton. And I've always wanted to solve that so that these thousands of contractors there and people like that will come to their office here. And, you know, for what it is, I did work for Aeroplane and Taupe, and I did work for Sabioso, which was right. What a great gift it was to me as a contractor to be 5 minutes away from my office there. I would love to see, rather than a 4-story townhouses or condos or apartments, I'd love to see a 4-story office building there that caters towards 8As and other things like that.
Well, I think a lot of that's market driven. And I mean, we've never not said that somebody could build stuff here. In fact, I mean, and the resolve to that right now has been Falcon Hill, which is Clearfield.
Yeah, but it attracts I appreciate that. And I'm also a Northrop Grumman alumni, and so I would have loved, because I was in those buildings over there where I had to take that bizarre route to an office that was about as far away from the South Gate or the West Gate as you could possibly put it.
Well, we've got Legend Hills that is historically about 95% full. And most of that is base related that's sitting in their buildings. There's some sporadic other things that are in there, but it is there. We've talked to developers that are looking at University Park area and doing office buildings there as well. There is another office building that's been planned for the piece next to the homes that were built there. So it's not that it's nobody wanting to do it. It's a matter of where and how and do they do it. At this point in time, without this, do they come and do it? And I don't know that they do, because where do you build the office building right now? How do you encourage an office? There has to be a location, and so that vision of a maybe place and offices in there, as well as other things, the vision with Clearfield Station of office buildings in there as well. All of that leads to what we're talking about. And again, Falcon Hill has their first building outside of the fence, first office building in the planning stages. And so there's another 150,000 square feet coming outside of the fence that is, in every sense of the word, Clearfield, as was U-Star, which is sitting within Clearfield's boundaries as well. Now, yes, it's a different kind of portion of Clearfield, but it is still here, and those things encourage people to then eat lunch here or do other things here and to stay within the city instead of traveling through the base and heading to Lake. So I think it all ties together. I wish there was a way to just, you got to get a developer to build an office building, and in lieu of just filling, they're not building new office buildings in Layton, they're backfilling space that's there. Same as they do with Legend Hills and other locations. So, but I agree with what you're saying, and I'd love to see that. And to me, that is part of what we've been looking at here is, I know there's a lot of talk of high density, but that density supports other things. And so it's that work-live arrangement of I can have office space and I can have housing next to it. I can have retail with that, I can have restaurants with that, and in the middle of maybe place a hotel. All of that ties together, but you don't get, on a development standpoint, it's a piece at a time. It's really hard to get a developer to say, and this is coming from the real estate end of things, really hard to get a developer to say, yeah, I'll just go over there to Clearfield, just build an office building. There's nothing around it. It's been the issue that they've had at Falcon Hill in really getting that to flow outside of the fence is to, with the restaurant and the hotel as an example, they want the hotel there. We've had it planned, we've had it ready, we've had it thought out, but without the restaurant to support a hotel, the hotel doesn't want to come. Well, the restaurant doesn't want to come if there's not a hotel
hotel.
to service it, and if there's not an office building next door to feed lunch and a dinner rush. And so it's that, just come build the office building. Well, luckily, as the developers, with the Sunridge development at Falcon Hill, they've got enough office demand right now that they're able to build the one. And that'll bring the other two things. But it's a rarity that you get somebody to just come in, and especially on a Main Street corridor, and tear something down and say, yeah, I'm willing to buy that business out, bulldoze it, and plop an office building in there with nothing there to support it.
Well, in the micro level, if you peruse my comments, part of the concern in that is I independently go in and read that document, and what I see, the discussion of office usage there, I think is lacking, to be able to define that well, to encourage it well, and for many things there. So that's actually one of the concerns that I had. I try to read things independently, and in this sense, I consciously backed away from that because I wanted to read it as if I'm somebody coming from the outside and reading it. And I can tell you from somebody that read it once it was stable and went through it in depth, that I would read that independently and think, oh, Clearfield is saying they just want a bunch of residential stuff. That's because everything is really geared. That's the impression I would get out of that.
See, and I didn't, but not.
Yeah.
But I'm looking at it on, and you're putting on that hat, and I'm putting on development hat, and thinking, okay, how do I view this as a developer? What do I read this as, and can I see the vision that a city has? And luckily, in our case, and especially, we're talking form-based code along State Street as a whole, but we're really talking 3 different nodes. One of those is already set with one developer.
Yeah.
And that developer has a very strong vision that we've latched onto and we've seen, but it has to have that form-based code around it to make that kind of a development work, because you're taking 2 different sides of State Street. You're taking State Street itself and incorporating medians down State Street. It's both sides of that. And so that doesn't happen really without that type of a form-based code that allows them that ability to put that together, instead of every single individual parcel trying to be done. But these guys explained at the very beginning, that's the purpose of form-based code, is to develop a place, not an individual parcel. It's an entire place, and it's been successful. I've seen the success behind it, so that's.
Well, yeah, and I recognize in the early days we talked about the string of pearls, and there are the 3 pearls. One of the troubling things I have as I look at that is it's those 3 separate developments, and I think Maybe Pond is a good example of that kind of a thing where I see that place. I think that's a great thing, that it fits within that concept of a mini community. But then you have like these strings, well, yeah, that's the pearl in there, and then you have ribbons on the north and on the south. So, but again, I don't want to spend time debating it, but these are my concerns, and I am, and this is just something I would guess to say, warning. I'm just hitting a couple of the major comments that I had in my document, because I'm not interested in going through it in depth, but. The specific encouragement of using stormwater management systems as open space, the big joke in my neighborhood and everywhere, not relegated to just Clearfield, is they saw it at a retention pond and call it a park. And I worry that that's what we are saying, is say, hey, go ahead and saw the retention pond and call it open space. And because you encouraged us to essentially do that.
I wanted to ask him, actually, if he would, can you address that? That was one of the things that I read in his comments, that, and I knew there was an answer to this one.
So stormwater, part of the landscape, a percentage of the landscape may be used for stormwater, but not the open space requirement. That is for usage of. And then regarding office, that's a great point. Clearfield wants office and jobs. And if you remember from our presentation, office is a building type that is actually permitted in all the zones, which I'm not, other than civic, most buildings are not permitted in all the zones.
So, I mean, those are the kinds of things. And then there's the stuff we've talked about before about the ancillary impact to schools and traffic and things like that. I worry that when all of this is here along State Street, I can be to the train station now to catch the train in a couple of minutes, and I'm going to end up with a Los Angeles traffic jam down State Street between 6 and 9 in the morning when all of these people leave and try to get somewhere. But there's no real way you can mitigate it unless you're willing to build a double-decker street down the middle. But it is something that we should be aware of, and I think all of us can look at some neighboring cities that we won't name, that you wonder, what were they thinking of doing all that development with no planning for traffic or parking for that matter?
Vern, to your point, it was interesting on the street. One thing I actually really liked in this is that there is in addressing the street, there's a recognition that different kind of nodes along this are going to have those real uptick in traffic, above what we've got right now. And so the street treatment, everything from the widths, the way the parking is managed, the stressing of additional modes of transportation with bikes, things like that, have been specifically called out in a way that I haven't seen in our code previous to this. A designation above and beyond what we've got. I mean, you've got multimodal transportation, you've got traffic or parking on there that is much more space conscious with the angling on there. Whereas right now, we've got just kind of this, concrete highway that just kind of blasts through right there. We need to be able to move traffic, but one of the things we've recognized in this that Clearfield has struggled with in our downtown is that right now our roads do a really good job of helping people get through Clearfield really fast. There's nothing that helps them stop and stay. And so I think there's been real careful consideration that in addressing the uptick in traffic that putting a lot of people downtown is going to have, that there's also a recognition that our types of transportation are going to shift, and that if we want people to stop and stay and do anything in Clearfield, there has to be some type of a traffic calming and a recognition that we need people to stay here and not blast through at 50. I would be much more happy if our city's economic vitality and our downtown increased with a 25 or a 35 mile an hour speed change on there. I mean, I would love to see that come through that, or additional intersections like is contemplated at Maybe Place to address that, because I say right now we move people to Layton and to Roy wonderfully, but it's at the detriment of the businesses and the residents and the opportunities that are here in our city. And I think it's a very fundamental change in that. Really quickly though, you brought up, I think, a very valid concern about the ability of elected officials to weigh in on this. Just to that point real quick, I think it's very valid because it's anytime you let that go, I mean, we've been elected and have a job to do to protect this for the residents. I think there are two protections in this. Number one, this is the body that gets to make a determination on that. So in that respect, looking at adopting this in a very narrow area, and it is just State Street, this isn't citywide, it's just in one spot. You have the elected officials doing their job, weighing, vetting, and being the voice of residents in that capacity. And so I think you have elected official oversight there, as properly it should be. At that point, if form-based code was adopted, then this acts like everything that we have now. Once that zoning designation is in place, then those rights are granted. Someone who has C1 right now doesn't necessarily have to come back to the council to get approval for something. If it fits within the parameters of that zone, they're able to execute their vested rights. And so very little of what may come through on C1 will ever come to the council. It's only in extraordinary circumstances where a development agreement as that tool that the city has to be able to look at circumstances outside of what we had prescribed for that zone, it then comes back as that default and that safety for residents to take a good look at it and make sure that this still, while perhaps outside of what the best that we could at the time prescribed parameters identified, and make sure it's still a good fit. I think in this there's been real careful care to not go pure form-based code and still allow that development agreement mechanism there, so that the planning commission that will see part of this, that is you know, appointed by, you know, the mayor with the consent of this group, does their job and executes what this document is outlined to do, but anything that comes up as a question mark, you know, is this too much? Have we exceeded the intent? Immediately, we have a fail-safe built in that kicks it right back up to the elected officials to make a designation on a case-by-case need basis if needed, to be that final authority and that final protection for our residents to say, yes, this works, or no, this exceeds. And as an example of that, we have a project before us tonight that is the very first example coming in potentially under the new code that uses that protective mechanism. It came in requesting form-based code with a development agreement. And we've had an opportunity tonight to go over, ask the developer, work on stuff, and to be able to reach a level of comfort and vet out some of those question marks. What if this falls through, what is our protection? What's our exposure if it doesn't work out? All of these processes would work that same way. It's just a very different way of looking at something. And in that respect, it's scary. There's a level of discomfort in doing that, and I really think this will be, we will look back at this having as much impact on the city as the depot going in. And so there's some scariness to that there. However, to allow this corridor to continue to degrade, to keep the same Euclidean zoning in just this area that we've struggled to make fit here, because what works here with one zoning doesn't work across the city in the same zoning spot, and that's always been our problem, allows us to take control over the changes that are coming to this area, whether we do it or not, but do it in a way that we set the terms and the basis for. And in that respect, I think the city is years ahead of other communities who will come to the same realization at some point. So I don't think we're surrendering any of our protection to residents, and that elected official oversight is still in place, even though the zoning itself runs a different way than what we're used to.
With that said, and you brought up a really interesting point, you know, as we jump ahead of this, where other cities will likely follow suit. I mentioned to staff this morning in our staff meeting that I've had other cities already approach me and ask us if we would come teach them how to do what we're doing with form-based code, and I said no, but I'll tell you who did it for us.
Yeah, these are the guys.
And you can talk to those guys, but I'm not getting you down, and I'm not getting you to jump ahead of us where we are. We're not teaching you how to do what we've spent months and months and months.
Ogden had to take a huge risk. Ogden's 25th Street and the Junction, that was a huge risk for that mayor and council to say, tear down a mall that was doing okay. I mean, that was huge. I mean, I think all of us remember the backlash on that. You go down and see how that has fundamentally changed Ogden. I would not go to downtown Ogden for anything, especially as a woman on my own, 10 years ago. Like, there was not a prayer I would go down there. It didn't feel safe. And now that is a welcoming area, and that entire area, the ripple effect off of that is unreal. Downtown Salt Lake, we saw the same thing. To take the ZCMI Mall, and I mean, it seemed crazy. And you look at the gathering place that has become, and it's incredibly dense, and it has uses that maybe seem kind of odd, but it is a sense of place, and you go down there, and even Murray. It's completely different. It's this whole shift. But I think for Clearfield, when we look back on it, this will be as big as when we went from agrarian to the depot coming in World War II. I mean, that flipped the city on its head. It was huge. It's uncomfortable. We know a certain way. The hard thing is that the way we've shopped has completely changed. You know, the way we commute has changed completely. Our population is skyrocketing as we talk about the influx and all of that kind of stuff. Everything that we do has changed. I think we're at a time when the zoning needs to represent that. And as a last comment, then I'll be quiet. This is still a living, breathing document like every other part of our code.
Absolutely.
I think the fundamental thing that becomes critical on this is that every quarter, every 6 months, every year, we are cracking this open and saying, okay, we intended it to be X. Where are we seeing pushback? Where do we need to tweak? Are we okay with most of this and have maybe an area that's a particular discomfort that we can immediately even go back and look at? You know, is there a soft spot or a weak spot, but we are comfortable with the whole? You know, do we need to disrupt this process over a certain section other than saying, hey, this is a good starting place, but let's go back. I'm still uncomfortable with maybe this spot or this spot, and let's immediately come back in and start working with it, so.
And a lot of that will come from feedback from outside as we as we implement that code? And how does that, what is the response to it?
I was just going to say that having the planning commission approve the site plans is no different than we're doing now with our regular zoning, so we're not giving up our right or responsibility, for the oversee for the citizens. It's the legislative part of the government and the code that the council does. The administering of it, once it's done, is left up to other groups. So it's no different. The planning commission's doing the site plan approvals now with traditional zoning. They will do them now with whatever kind of zoning a city has.
Can I clarify one thing? I looked up the stormwater. In the open space, it's up to maximum 10% maybe used for stormwater in the open space. But you think about if there's plazas and hardscapes, they're going to need an area for that to run off. So,
and it's not unusual when you look at, I meant to mention that, it's not unusual when you look at a dense community like that, where it is a downtown kind of a scenario, to have that become two things. It's not the same as a residential area where you call a park a storm basin and say, oh yeah, that's a park because we put some playground equipment in it. So when it floods and the kids are all in there, yeah, no, that's not the same kind of mentality. Okay.
Well, I truly appreciate the thoughts and the discussion here. It's always hard to disagree with people whose opinions I inherently respect.
I wanted to say, though, I appreciate Vern going through that so thoroughly. As I went through it, it caused me to do a little more reflection on it as well and get some of my questions answered.
My wife asked me that this morning as we talked, and I was going over these things with her, and she says, does that just drive you nuts? And I said, no, I'm thrilled that somebody's going through it. I mean, I've gone through it that deep. I've sat in the process of this, so I've gone through it piece by piece as we've gone through this, and section by section as we've built these, but I hope that everyone does. And so that's, to have the evidence that it's been done is important to me, so I greatly appreciate that.
And I agree with the council member down there too, that this is a significant event in the history of Clearfield. That if this is right, it's going to be a huge deal, and if it's wrong, it's going to be a huge deal.
Yep. We've always talked about that unique theme here in Clearfield, and I really feel like this is it.
So that's why I said I very literally have lost sleep over this, because I don't want to be the one responsible, because I've been around long enough to sit in meetings where they say, what were they thinking when I was involved in that decision process? And I don't want to be driving through here 10 or 15 years from now and saying, what were they thinking when they let this happen? And
Agreed.
And that's
But I do want to be on the end of that when they drive through there and go, wow, look at this city.
Yeah, and that's the hope.
Right now you drive from Roy to the end of Layton there, and you don't know where you started and where you stopped, and you've just passed through 4 or 5 different cities.
You'll know, because you're going to stop in Clearfield and
Yep.
go 25 miles an hour for the next.
Damn straight you are, and you're going to know exactly what's on that street.
I have
too.
to say, in a neighboring street to the south, I was stopped long enough to where I could have got out of my car and got a drink and got back into my car.
Well, council, do we have are there any more questions for Jake and John? Okay, if not, I would entertain a motion on this.
Your Honor, I'll move to approve ordinance 2018-06, enacting Title 11, Chapter 19 to the Clearfield City Code, adopting a form-based code to regulate the development of the downtown corridor, and authorize your signature to any necessary documents.
Second.
We have a motion and we have a second. Any further discussion? Okay, Councilmember Roper?
Aye.
Councilmember Peterson?
Aye.
Councilmember Thompson?
Aye.
Councilmember Bush?
Aye.
Councilmember Phipps?
So based upon my trust of others, aye.
Thank you, Vern. All right, that is unanimous. That is unanimous, and we will move on now to consider approval of an amendment to the final subdivision plat for West Square subdivision located at approximately 875 South Depot. This is the project that we discussed in the public hearing. I will say the fact that, one, they're going to condo this out, as we talk, and it was brought up in our work session as well, and from the meetings down in St. George, when we talk, there's affordable housing and there's housing affordability. And the thing that is lacking right now everywhere is housing affordability. To condo something out as a developer in lieu of renting it and actually condo it out and sell that becomes housing affordability. And so from me personally, I applaud a developer who's willing to take that on and do that and contribute to what is seriously lacking right now, not just here in Clearfield, but throughout the county and the state right now. It is the biggest concern, along with water, that this state has right now. And so any further questions or concerns from council on this one?
Would it be possible just to hear from the applicant?
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, where he's come in and
since it's been a long while.
I say he sat all the way through this.
It's been long enough that I didn't recognize him when I thought he was just the public guy.
Sure. First, any questions that you'd like me to field? I'm happy to share with you our decision process in moving from apartments, which are still needed throughout the Wasatch Front, but moving from apartments to condos. The single-family detached starter home seems these days to be a fiction. And the starter townhome is getting to that point. As you are probably aware, townhomes are getting up into the $300,000 price point. We are desperately, developers and builders are desperately trying to provide products that will allow for ownership. We are all aware of the benefits that come with ownership, both to individuals, families, communities. So we saw an opportunity to convert this to condos, and we're very pleased with it. We're already receiving a lot of interest from potential buyers, and everything is in place. We have our HOA documents prepared, our CC&R documents are ready to record. So we do appreciate the city's willingness to allow us to go ahead and amend. It's going to be a fantastic project. Lots of amenities, clubhouse, weight room, swimming pool, grass for the kids to play on, and fantastic location. So we truly feel like this is a win-win for all parties.
Do you know what price point you're sitting at?
For the condos, I think we're a little under 200,000 for the condos.
And that's fantastic.
So, sorry, Spencer. Did I miss?
That wasn't a comment. That was
I
just
have no idea what their price point is. It was, I had something in my throat, so I'll turn off the microphone now and just sit there.
Yeah, and we have different products. We have 1, 2, and 3 bedroom, if I remember right. I'm not the project manager on this, so I might be just making this up. But
it sounds good.
But yeah, I think we are starting under 200,000.
Very good.
So
awesome. Well, thank you very much. We
Thank
appreciate you being here. Council, if there's no further questions, I'd entertain a motion on this one.
Your Honor, I move to approve amendments to the development agreement with Ironwood Development Group for the West, wait, is that the right one? Did I get that wrong?
Yeah, it's number 7.
Final
Oh my gosh,
subdivision.
I'm on the wrong, I apologize, I scrolled down too far.
Number 7.
Just kidding. Let's try
Same,
this again.
same place, just
We'll go ahead and do it right this time for the record. Your Honor, I would move to approve the amendment to the final subdivision plat for West Square subdivision located approximately 875 South Depot Street. Would authorize your signature to any necessary documents.
Second.
we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, now we'll go to item number 8, which is to consider approval of amendments to the development agreement with Ironwood Development Group for the West Square subdivision. Anything else you need to bring up on that, Spencer?
Just a couple things real quick, Mayor. So we had a discussion meeting with the council relative to the changes to the development agreement consistent with what we've heard tonight. Going from apartments to condominiums required us to amend the development agreement. Additionally, the developer has proposed some changes to the facade relative to the percentages that would be included for the materials. We had a discussion on that. They had proposed percentages, and staff's included language consistent with allowing approval of what was presented. to the council at that meeting, and so we've included that language as well. And then I think that was it, other than the reduction in the height going from the 40-foot down to the 35 was the other change that would be accommodated with this amendment to the development agreement. So staff just wanted to make sure that we reminded the council of that discussion last week and those changes that have been included in the staff report.
Okay. Council, any further questions?
No, I was ready to make a motion.
Then do it, Kent.
I will approve the amendments to the development agreement with Ironwood Development Group for the West Square subdivision located approximately 875 South Depot Street, and authorize your signature to any necessary documents. I make a motion to do that. Not, I'm doing it myself.
We have a motion from Councilmember Bush.
Second.
We have a second from Councilmember Roper. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Well, that'll take us to item number 9, which is consider approval of the development agreement with DG Construction for Clearfield Junction, located at approximately 17, 51, and 101 North Main. We're going to turn the time over to Summer Palmer, our Assistant City Manager, for some information and background.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We heard back in April 10th, in a work session about the proposal from DG Construction about the future development here at the corner of State Street and Center Street, and also including the Albion property. At that time, we started working on a development agreement, and the developer is here if you have any additional questions, but we've presented you with a development agreement, and it's our recommendation that you approve that agreement. We talked about it in work session last week and again today, so I think we've vetted most of your concerns, but if there are any other, again, Donovan's here, and staff would be happy to answer any questions you have.
I appreciate the conversation in the work session that resolved my concern about the library, so.
Great.
Do you want to, I mean, I've got a lot of people out here in the audience that have no idea what you're talking about. And so giving us the background on our conversations with Donovan is really wonderful. But maybe some background on what we're talking about and what this project is.
Sure. Actually, Donovan's got a great vision for this project, and if you want to join us up here at the on the stand or at the mic, Donovan's purchasing the Albion property, and the city has approximately 4.65 acres, including the corner, all the way back to the train tracks. And we are entering into an agreement that would sell a portion of that property to DG Construction for a mixed-use development, reserving the corner for continued negotiations with Davis County to move the library from its current location in Clearfield to this corner lot, which will really, I believe, create a great civic place for our residents. Donovan's got some great conceptual drawings that he's provided council. This will include 244 plus or minus units and 20,000 square feet of commercial retail space below and facing Main Street. So here's some of the conceptual drawings that we've been looking at. Donovan, do you have anything to add to our discussion here?
No, we're just eager to get the development agreement done so we can execute the purchase of the property and get our architect to start generating some actual construction drawings that we can then apply for a permit with the city to break ground. So we're still 90 plus days away from having permit applications and going through the new form-based code review process where they're going to review the architectural, the site plan. But conceptually, there'll be retail on the bottom story, and commercial or retail restaurants is what we're going to be pushing for on the bottom floors facing the street, and then 3 more stories of residential above it. So that should create a good draw for the residents, and that they've got a really nice site amenity where they can, shop, eat, in the same area. And then the library there makes just a great draw for for even a wider demographic, you know, for, you know, older retired people. We'd love to see, you know, renting those areas, and that's just a great draw all around for the project. So we're eager to see the library come in there, and we're eager to get this approved so we can start breaking ground on our architecturals.
Good deal. Thank you very much. I appreciate you coming up here and taking that time for us. Okay, council, any further questions on this? If not, entertain a motion.
Your Honor, I move to approve the development agreement with DG Construction for Clearfield Junction, located at approximately 1751 and 101 North Main Street, and authorize your signature to enter any necessary documents.
Second.
We have a motion from Councilmember Bush and a second from Councilmember Peterson, and almost a second from Councilmember Thompson.
You can third it.
We'll call him a third then. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes. That'll bring us to item number 10, which is to consider approval of ordinance 2018-07, amending the city code, Title 5, Chapter 1, nuisance. We'll turn some time back over to the Spencer Brimley Show.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. I lost connection to the network, and so I don't have the staff report, so I apologize. I was trying to get that pulled up, and it's locked me up. So relative to the comments that were made earlier during the public comment portion, and just to give a little bit more context maybe for the public and those who haven't been involved in the process at this point, Clearfield City has recently made a change relative to their code compliance division and their enforcement to go from criminal to civil and move it to more of an administrative process. That process has been subject to change or reorganization of staff and moving them out of the police department into the community development department in order to allow that administrative component or civil enforcement. Relative to that, as we looked at our code, and the mayor mentioned this earlier about our ability to enforce relative to teeth being in the code. And so what we've sought to do here with the help of our city attorney is to really craft a nuisance code that would be a little bit more substantive and allow our code enforcement officers to go out and actually have some backing when they do provide a notice of violation or things of that nature. So there is not a lot of substantive changes. The language in there has been reorganized to a certain extent, and Stuart used his crafty legalese, to make it awesome. But at this point, what we've looked at is some minor changes and some reorganization within the code in order to allow us a greater ability to notice a nuisance or a violation, and then to follow up on that and give a little bit more detail relative to those items that were there was not a lot of teeth to before. So clarifying definitions and providing a little more explanation relative to those items. So Title 5 nuisance is a change only to better help us do the code compliance aspect that we're now pushing a little bit harder with our 2 code compliance officers and the reorganization that happened within the city. So we did discuss this previously during a work session, and staff has sought to incorporate the comments and feedback that we received relative to the will of the council, and so we've implemented that into the proposal for the ordinance, and so hopefully if there's any additional questions, we can answer those at this time.
Council, do you have any questions for Spencer?
Yeah, I brought up something, and I was going to mention it last week in the workshop, and I forgot, but when I was reading through here, it talks about construction equipment or machinery and vehicles, but as I'm looking at our city and thinking about it, there is a lot of farm equipment that is old and dilapidated that's sitting around in various locations. I think we need to include farm equipment on here along with the construction equipment.
So would that be farm equipment on any parcels not with an A1 or A2 designation?
Well, if they're not operable.
Well, but if they're on a farm, having a...
So the issue you're going to have relative to that on the A1 and the A2, if I can just clarify a little bit, is that because they are agriculturally zoned and intended for agricultural use, you know, the farm equipment is not typically licensed, registered, and all the other things that we would look at when it comes to other equipment. And so there's a difficulty in that. Now, if it is in areas, or again, it's if there's an inoperable vehicle or a junk vehicle or whatever the case may be in an area, we can look at that. But I think, and I'll defer to somebody who knows things better than I do, but I think that just creates a little bit of a difficulty relative to our code compliance officers, and maybe reduces that substance that we're looking for when it comes to the actual compliance and enforceable code. So I don't know.
Question to that point, perhaps for Stuart, then, with the proposal as it's drafted right now, where Councilmember Bush has brought up perhaps non-working farm equipment in whatever zone that is, would the definitions that we have as far as inoperable vehicles being junk vehicles, whatever, are there provisions, or is the language representative of agricultural type vehicles? I mean, or is it just like vehicles?
Vehicles are vehicles. We can do the vehicles. That's not the part that's going to be the hard part. The hard part's going to be somebody's got an old sickle or something.
Yeah, but something.
My
okay.
agricultural background's really limited. Some sort of machinery that they think is cute.
Right.
That is sitting in their front yard that you don't think is cute. That's
Antiques, and that's
where it's going to be
Difficult.
a little more difficult to enforce. To go.
But
I have my opinion, but that doesn't matter.
Right, but as far as like if it's something that a reasonable person, or whatever that standard, I don't know the exact language, could be construed as a vehicle, whether it's agriculture, construction, whatever that is.
I think that one's dangerous. Just
No, I'm just asking if it's, no, I'm saying
vehicle,
not add more.
If it's a vehicle.
If it, would that cover right now? If a reasonable person looked at it and said, I don't care what type it is, this meets the, you know, what we already have prescribed here for a junk vehicle.
Yeah,
There's nothing that would preclude.
An old farm truck melting in your front yard would be a vehicle,
still, okay.
according to this.
Okay, I just want to make sure that it doesn't restrict it.
A wagon.
Or a tractor.
Or a tractor, or something
Okay.
of that nature.
That starts
they're
getting
gonna think is neat and part of their flower garden, but there's weeds growing up through it, and we don't, that's a different issue, we can deal with weeds.
Yeah, that's right.
We can get into the weeds.
If there's
Okay.
other problems, then that's gonna be a harder.
Okay.
Construction equipment, you know, when we say, hey, construction equipment being parked on a property, dump truck, is that construction equipment?
It's also a vehicle.
Yeah,
So
It's a vehicle,
shouldn't be
but-
parked, they have to be parked appropriately.
Right.
Not in a front yard or something like that. I don't think construction equipment's gonna be trailers dropped off,
Yeah, I mean,
you know,
scissor lifts, there's some other things in there that aren't necessarily vehicle. I mean, yeah, there is, we bring up those things, but then we also talk about where they're parked and how they're parked and,
Right.
and those types of things. And so there's other aspects of the code that, you know, you can't park on this type of surface. And so we run into that. So we stay construction equipment or machinery, but we still have vehicles in there. And if it's a drivable vehicle, then it's a drivable vehicle or whatever the case may be, right? So it's a vehicle, it's a vehicle. Doesn't matter if it's used for construction or farming, it's a vehicle.
Okay.
I don't know if that's gonna address Councilmember Bush's concerns as far as the farm equipment. I don't have a real good answer for that.
It was just a thought that I had, I don't know, saying that.
Okay.
I just thought it would go down.
Any other concerns? Okay, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion. Don't everybody jump
Your
over
Honor,
this.
I move to approve.
I did the last two.
I know, right? Your Honor, I move to approve ordinance 2018-07, amending City Code Title 5, Chapter 1, nuisance, and authorize the mayor's signature to any necessary documents.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. I'm glad you got in there, because I figured if you hesitated any longer, you might have been the third
Yep.
again.
Yeah,
We have a motion from Councilmember Thompson and a second from Councilmember Peterson. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Voice
We
vote,
need a
please.
voice
Oh, we need a voice vote on this one, too.
Okay, what's wrong?
Oh, yeah, I guess we do. Okay. Okay, Councilmember Bush.
Aye.
Councilmember Peterson.
Aye.
Councilmember Thompson.
Aye.
Councilmember Roper.
Aye.
Councilmember Phipps.
Aye.
Okay, that is unanimous. Brings us to our communication items.
Wait, do we have the?
Oh, we do have one more. Oh, I almost missed Scott. And that is why I did not catch the roll call, is because I'm looking down here and going, what? I don't know why it says it's a roll call, but that explains it. We do have item number 11 to consider the award of bid for the Freeport G Street Sanitary Sewer Improvement Project. And we'll turn the time over to Scott Hodge to give us some information there.
Mayor, Council, it's good to be with you this evening. Several weeks ago, We advertised for a capital improvement project down in the Freeport Center to replace a sewer line. We received 6 bids for that project. It is on G Street. They'll start at 3rd Street and go up to 5th Street with this first phase. We anticipate it'll take 4 phases to replace the entire length of this sewer line. The first phase is on G Street from 3rd to 5th Street. There is 3 railroad tracks, spur lines that we have to go under. To accommodate that, we have to do a directional bore to place that pipe underneath there for that purpose. And we did have 6 contractors. The low bid that we received was from Brinkerhoff Construction with a bid amount of $297,210. Our engineers have reviewed those bids and have recommended that we award the contract to them to do this project. We as a city have worked with Brinkerhoff in the past, and they have done a good job in the past on projects that they have done for us. Any questions?
So what's the schedule for this?
We would get started as soon as we can. I know Brinkerhoff has contacted us, and they're they're filling up their schedule with work for the summer, and so they're trying to program this in to the schedule. Don't know exactly when that would start till we have a pre-construction meeting and can sit down with them and see what they really would anticipate. But we would think it would start fairly soon. It's a 90-day project once they do get started on it.
So I guess there's not really a season out there where it's better or worse for them to work on it.
The construction season, if it's anything like last year, most contractors could have worked all winter long. So, you know, the prime season is the summer months, and so they do fill up their schedule. Once their schedules get full, then most contractors won't try to take on more work than they can accomplish before the winter months hit. They just don't know what to plan on for the winter. So, but right now they do have this project. They know it, and they want to program it into their schedule to get done. So I would anticipate this summer that it would take place.
Good. Any other questions for Scott? Okay, thanks, Scott.
Thank
you. And seeing no further questions, I'd entertain a motion.
Your Honor, I move to award the bid of the Freeport G Street Sanitary Sewer Improvement Project to Brinkerhoff Excavating and Construction for the bid amount of $297,210. Approve funding for the bid amount with contingency and engineering costs of $52,790 for a total project cost of $350,000, and authorize your signature to any necessary documents.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilmember Phipps and a second by Councilmember Roper. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. That now brings us on to our communication items. We did today have the groundbreaking ceremony for the Have a Heart home, which is be built up just north on that lot that we donated. They broke ground on that today. There's a video out there somewhere of yours truly running the excavator and taking a couple of shovels of dirt, and I did not tip the excavator over. So just saying. Yeah, we're excited to have that moving forward. That is a big lot to be building on, and I had conversations with both Jed and Bruce Nielsen, and Nielsen Homes is going to be building that house. And the one concern that I brought up to them, the plan is for, if I remember right, this is single level, correct? And what they've submitted to us. Mm-hmm. This is a half-acre lot almost. Historically, those homes, and they've already got applications for it. It's done in an application process and determined the need of that family, because it is sold at a significant cost savings to them that they likely wouldn't have been able to afford it in any other way. But most often families with special needs and handicapped kids that maybe need one level and ramps and so forth. As I looked at that lot, I was very concerned about that one, it could have been easily 2 different lots, but the way the lot is situated, it's not. It's only feasible to have a single lot. But to put a family that has those needs and that ability to get into this house and then expect them to somehow water, with culinary water, a half acre of land, and maintain it, when they may have those limitations was a concern. And so Nielsen is going to look into xeriscaping the front portion of the property in such a way that it'll be very, very attractive, and then probably just do grass in the backyard so that the kids have a place to go play. I was very pleased with them. We're working with a very, very conscientious builder who really wants to make this a prize gym for that neighborhood. And, I did meet with the neighbors next door as they were a little concerned. They realized that in all of the things that we've done in getting that house ready and getting things going with it, we failed to, walk next door and tell the neighbors what we were doing. And so when 100 people showed up out on their front yard to do a groundbreaking, they were a little concerned as to what we were doing. So, but we're able to cover that with them. Had a good time last week or week before last with our city employees golf tournament. Had a good time out there playing with Summer, and we won, so that's really all that mattered.
Didn't have anything to do with Scott.
We did have a ringer on the team, but that was okay. Thanks to Scott for carrying us. We needed that help. But good time, and thanks to staff for putting that together, and Trevor for making it work. So, I was out of town last week in D.C., and while I was out of town, I got a call from the president of the Utah Defense Alliance, where I serve on their board, and he'd asked if I was attending the Association of Defense Communities meetings in June. Well, we have that set for next year's budget. We did not budget for it this year because up until earlier this year, we were not members of the Association of Defense Communities. So I told them, unfortunately, that's not in our budget to make that happen this year. They felt it was important enough that the Utah Defense Alliance is going to pay for it and foot the bill to have me make sure that I can get out there and sit with the Secretary of the Air Force and the Deputy Secretary of Defense and have some conversations. It's a lot of one-on-one conversations with them, so gives us a chance to go out and represent Hill. So I will be out of town the 19th, the meeting of the work session on the 19th, and then on the policy session on the 26th for the National League of Cities. That is all I had. Councilmember Bush.
Just thank you to Spencer and Stewart for the work done on these ordinances, and any other staff members. Good job. I know it's a lot of work, and all of the other staff people, thank you for all your work. And the parks really look good, Eric. Tell your guys that, the grass looks really nice in all the parks that I've seen. So that's all I have.
Okay, Councilmember Peterson.
Just echo what Councilmember Bush said. We've had a lot of substantive and significant ordinance changes come through that have required, I don't even want to think about the hours, the research and what it's taken to whittle it down to the point where we are able to wrestle that, and then the revisions that necessarily come from a shotgun of questions coming back at staff with questions. So, as always, I appreciate the time and vetting that goes into that and the availability to allow us to make an informed decision. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Councilmember Thompson.
Just want to echo mosquito abatement. Last week, they did a drone. They're trying to pretty much have a granulator be able to go into areas that are harder for us to get to mosquitoes and things of that nature and take care of them. And the drone is that very first step. It's actually kind of ahead of its time in a sense because of the fact that the way the programming works, the main programmer doesn't allow people to tweak it. But this contractor that the Mosquito Baby District found, it's open, it allows tweaking, it allows the granulator to work. So the drone is going to be very interesting. Also, if you're a resident of our city and you want to have your area, like an area sprayed, like for an event, keep in mind that they won't be able to really do it the night or before your event like usual. There's just been a high demand for spraying, and I will say it's not our city. Our city only had 6 spray demands for last month, which is way lower than everyone else. But going forward, If you do want something sprayed, it might be a couple of nights before your event. So just keep that in mind if you do need mosquitoes taken care of. Other than that, that's all I had to report. And thank you to I do want to echo the statements that work is incredible. And for me, I'm just like, it all makes sense. So I appreciate it. I appreciate everyone's outlook on it because I'm still learning a lot. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember, and congratulations on at least making it through like the third round in for the state treasurer for the Republican Party. So,
well, it was vice chair.
Or vice chair, excuse me,
Yes,
not treasurer, the vice chair. And
yes.
To make it through 3 rounds is pretty dang good.
Yeah, thank you.
We expect some big things later down the line. Councilmember Open.
I'm just excited about things moving forward with form-based code. I think it's going to really do a lot for our community. I also wanted to say thanks to the mayor and Councilmember Bush and Councilmember Phipps for coming out and supporting the Youth Commission at their activity. They had a great time. They learned a lot of things they're going to go back and rethink for their next one. And they did this all on their own. They only came to us when they absolutely needed something. And it was awesome to see them pick that up and show their leadership.
Love it. It was a good event. Okay, Councilmember Phipps.
Nothing. No.
Okay, staff reports. Summer?
Well, our fearless leader is off floating in the Bahamas right now, celebrating his milestone anniversary, so hopefully they're having fun. He was live streaming this, so
Man,
I'm very disgusted.
Got to get a life. You don't sit in the Bahamas or in Nicaragua or wherever he is, Honduras, and stream.
Big boo for
council
him, but
meetings.
last week we didn't have policy session, but last week was Law Enforcement Appreciation Week, and so we didn't get a chance to publicly recognize our law enforcement professionals, but they do great things in Clearfield here for us, and we really do appreciate them and all they do on our behalf. And it's a job that I can't even imagine doing, but they do it with real professionalism, and we just have a great group of individuals down there. And I don't hesitate in telling everybody that I interact with on the administrative services director level before and on the city manager level now that we have the best police department by far in the state, and they should keep their hands off them. So we also last week had our community leader luncheon, and this is the second one that we've had, and we appreciate council members, the mayor attending those. But those community leader luncheons are for anybody in the community who has the ability to reach out to groups of individuals, whether they be neighborhood groups, school groups, ecclesiastic groups. We would encourage those leaders to come and take part in those luncheons. They're an opportunity for us as staff to tell you what's happening here in Clearfield, and so that you can help prepare your groups for those things coming up. But they're also an opportunity for you to be able to bring concerns or issues to staff and help us make sure that we're recognizing those and being able to address those. Our next one is June 19th. They're at noon, and they're down in the multi-purpose room. So we've had a really good turnout so far, and we hope to keep the momentum going for those community leader lunches. And then Memorial Day is this coming Monday. We will be closed, the offices will be closed, but at 9 a.m. at the Clearfield Cemetery, we'll be having a flag ceremony. So all are welcome and invited to attend that. I think that's it.
Very good. And we have, I'm going to lose her first name, last name Leigh Miller, will be speaking at our Memorial Day. Leigh Miller, you'd recognize that's her son's bust that's in the lobby downstairs. So she'll be the speaker at our Memorial Day event. So.
And did everybody else get an invitation to the Syracuse one at 8 o'clock? Okay.
any other staff reports?
Yeah, I have one.
Oh.
And
Seriously?
Yeah, and I swear I was going to do this even before the kind words
I'm
tonight
next.
towards
I'm next.
staff. Spencer's a little bit nervous. But I just wanted to say, watching the form-based code and the discussions go down, I'm grateful for the civility and the professionalism, even when we don't agree on things all the time, and working through, which are big, complex issues that staff spending endless hours back and forth following things. I've sat through many meetings here and out there, and it's nice to be part of a group that handles this kind of thing in a civil manner and can actually have a professional dialogue and get to an end, whether they all agree with it or don't agree with it or however they feel. But I just from staff standpoint, from my standpoint, thank you. I really appreciate that.
Thank you. It's, I actually brought that up with a bunch of realtors last week while I was in DC, that I met with their leadership, telling them that, you know, if you've got, the biggest lesson my dad ever taught me was that if you've got two partners and they both think alike, you don't need one of them. But at the very end of the day, they still have to walk out being friends. And so a council that can get together and even with that banter and the going back and forth, and still walk out of here whole. We got a good thing going. And I did, while I was in DC, while I didn't get to personally thank our police department here, I did get to attend some of the police functions while I was in DC. It always ties in with my meeting, as also with the police officers memorial.
I was afraid you were going to say I did have a relationship with a police officer.
Oh, I wouldn't announce that on Facebook. I'd wait to do that later. So yes. No. All right, that brings us.
Just real quick. I know I'm sitting down, so I'm not very noticeable, but I've already spoken a lot this evening. We just want to keep tabs for the council on the Clearfield Station Area Plan process that's going on right now. We are still formulating that committee. We recently just met with Country Oaks and Oakstone to talk about some connectivity potentially there for that property. And so they've been very open and want to be a part of the process, so we're grateful for that. But we'll be meeting with our consultant tomorrow afternoon to talk about the next open house opportunity. Trevor's been working feverishly to get the website for public comment up. We've had some difficulties with the website itself, but we're working on that to make sure we can get as much public comment as possible. But I just want to make sure the council is aware that that is moving forward, and we've gotten a lot of great input to date, but we want to make sure we're moving that along productively. So that was it. Just want to make sure you're aware of that.
And in our work session, you were each given the poster for the 4th of July for the music section, so you know where we are. We'll meet again next week, but very cool. Trevor, you want to say something real quick?
Yeah, so just to 4th of July, I just want to give you a heads up. We are starting our big promotion advertising push starting later this week and early next week throughout the month of June. So this is an integrated marketing approach, so you'll see it in multiple different channels: billboards, newsletter, email campaigns, Facebook campaigns, print media, posters. We're trying to touch every person that we can. So, so if you see that around, we'll send you out a list of where we're going to put those, so you can be aware of those. But if you have any questions, we do have a dedicated URL now for our 4th of July. It is ccjuly4.com, so you can go straight to the 4th of July information with that URL. So, but I just want to let you all know that that push is happening.
Is it live?
It is live, yes.
Thank you.
So you can go to that today, and I've updated it with all the information for our bands and different information there. And we'll continue to make updates as we get more information there. So,
very good. Thanks, Trevor. Well, I would entertain a motion to adjourn as the city council and reconvene.
Mayor?
Oh, sorry.
I promise to be really
it's a quarter
quick.
to 9 and my, I'm
We'll
starting to lose
pretend
there.
that I'm distracted. So, no meeting next week, but we do have meetings every Tuesday in June. There you go. Go ahead.
Perfect. Every meeting in June, and then we'll skip the first one in July.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, now I would entertain a motion to adjourn as the city council and reconvene as the CDRA.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Kent, it is yours.
Okay, welcome to CDRA meeting, everybody. This won't be as long as council meeting, I promise. The first item is to consider approval of the minutes from April 10th, work session and May 8th policy session. Have you had a chance to look at those? If so, is there a motion?
Chairman Bush, I would move to accept both sets of minutes as they have been drafted.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Second item is to consider approval of the development agreement with DG Construction for Clearfield Junction located approximately 1751 and 101 North Main Street. This is what we've talked about previously. Unless there's any other comments or questions on it, I'd entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the development agreement with DG Construction for Clearfield Junction, located at approximately 1751 and 101 North Main Street, and authorize the chair's signature to any necessary documents.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That is all we have.
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
We are adjourned.
Thank you, everyone, for being here.
He's got the second down now.
He's not going to get third anymore.
This is already.
Yeah. We've had several long discussions about that. So.
That's right.
She's at the state PTA convention. So I won't have to explain it